It was the middle of October, and the leaves were just starting to change to that beautiful mix of orange and yellow. My wife Courtney and I, both married for 2 years now, wanted to take advantage of the fall foliage and go to the Catskill Mountains in New York. We booked an Airbnb by Overlook Mountain, a popular hiking destination. We're avid hikers, so we go all over the country to explore national parks and famous hiking destinations. This was our 3rd time going to Catskill, New York. The owner of the Airbnb was an adorable-looking sweet woman who is definitely in her 50s or 60s. Out of respect, I'll just name her Kathy. Kathy was very easy to work with and very responsive. She had the key to the little house hidden in a code-locked mailbox, and she gave me the code. Inside was a very rustic and cabin-like feel, with wooden walls and floors, but brightly colored rugs to cover the wood floors. It was well kept and nice, spacious enough for 2 people. Outside were woods in all directions. There was a shed converted to a little clubhouse outside, with a pool table, dartboard, and a bunch of things hung on the walls. We drove to the base of the Overlook Mountain Trail, and there were some people around. Not many, but a few. As we were ascending the mountain on foot, we'd pass occasional hikers on their way down. Eventually, we sat on a big rock overlooking an amazing cliff view, just admiring for a while. Eventually, we heard a footstep crunching a leaf behind us. We turned around and saw a woman by herself leaning on a tree. She was about 55 or something. She was clearly looking at us until we turned and saw her. Then she awkwardly looked away. I would have otherwise said hi, but she made it weird. We just ignored it until randomly we heard her say hi. So we turned again and saw she was looking at us. We said hi back, then she asked where we're from. From there, we got into a seemingly normal conversation with her. She said her name was Melinda and she was from the area. She asked where we were staying, offering her knowledge of the area to suggest places to check out. I told her right up the road at an Airbnb. She suggested some places to go, and then the conversation kind of died off from there. Courtney and I said, "Well, it was nice meeting you," as we now started descending the trail back towards the car. Weirdly, we noticed the Melinda lady was now heading down as well, but she was keeping a bit of a distance, not within earshot. We found a spot to rest on the way down for a minute, and we noticed Melinda seemed to stop too at the same time. She was still out of earshot. This was weird. We felt like she was following us. So we decided to just stay put and wait her out to see if she'd move. After a while, she finally did continue making her way down past us. She looked at us and smiled and said, "Okay," as she walked past us. We waited until she was out of sight before we continued hiking down. We got back to the parking area a while later, and from there we went back to the Airbnb right up the road. We were exhausted, so we took a nap. Then we went out to eat at this place called Garden Cafe, which was highly rated. After that, it was pitch black, so we went back to the Airbnb with plans to just cuddle up and watch movies. We had a long day of hiking, so we were going to sleep good. There was only a TV in the living room, but it was set up to have Netflix and everything, so we found a good movie to watch and put it on. We were so tired that we started drifting off to sleep halfway through the movie. I noticed Courtney was completely knocked out, and I was following suit, when suddenly I was immediately snapped back awake to the sound of knocks at the door. We were in the middle of the woods. Knocks at the door were a huge concern. Nobody should be here. There was no peephole in the door, so I couldn't check who was there. All the blinds were closed, and I wasn't going to dare peeking out of one of them. I shook Courtney awake and told her someone's at the door. I muted the TV, and we waited for a second set of knocks that came only seconds later. We both agree there's no shot we were opening that door. It was still early, like 9 o'clock, so I texted Kathy asking if she was at the door. There was then a knock at the window and a woman's voice on the other side asking if someone was in there. Courtney and I were now freaked out. I'd say we were in a panic. Knocking on a stranger's window is not a normal thing somebody does. What happened next was even more disturbing. We heard the person trying to lift open the window. Thankfully, it was locked. Kathy was calling me now. I showed Courtney and she said maybe it is her outside, that's why she's calling. I picked up in a low voice and Kathy on the other end told me she was at home and she asked who was outside. When I told her what's happening, she sounded confused and concerned. None of her friends or relatives would go to that house. She told us not to open the door and we took her advice. After hanging up, there were now knocks on another window and the voice called, "I need help. Please let me in." We knew better than to fall for this. Something bad would happen if we let them in. We started to realize it could have been that weird lady from the hiking trail. Like, what if she followed us back to the Airbnb? We honestly wouldn't have even noticed. I went to the bedroom where it was completely pitch black, and I ever so delicately moved the blind up just a crack to peek outside. There was a man walking past the window. He didn't notice me. I went back to Courtney to tell her that there were multiple people out there. This was an invasion. We called 911, I gave them the address and stayed on the line. There were a few more knocks at the door, but we never answered. The people outside eventually gave up, I believe, because the knocks and yells stopped. The police took a while to get there, but when they did, we felt a lot better. The officers were very nice, and they stayed with us while we figured out what we wanted to do. I called Kathy again and explained what happened and why we didn't feel safe staying there tonight anymore. She was completely understanding. We still paid for that night, but the rest of the stay was canceled and the officer stayed with us while we packed our things and loaded the car. One of them led us in his car to the nearest motel where we stayed for the night. Given the circumstances, we drove home the next day because, honestly, we just didn't want to be in the area after that. We think this was some kind of group that was looking for easy targets to abduct and may have been using a woman as some kind of scout to gain their trust. They saw two young women by themselves, so they tried to target us for future hikes. We've started to bring pepper spray with us as a form of self-defense.
If you hit that like button, there's a good chance someone else's spine will get tingled by these stories. It was late October when I woke up to one of my best friends, Connor, hitting me up, asking if I was down to come to his house later. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in high school at the time, so I spent most of my weekends with friends. Connor's parents were out of town for the weekend, and he was home alone with one of his older sisters, whom I'll just call Chantel. She was supposedly watching him the entire weekend. With that information, I knew he was just asking me to come over and party again. I didn't have any work responsibilities to worry about at the time, so I agreed to the idea and headed over to his house. When I got to his house, we played some Call of Duty on his family room's couch for a few hours, talking about school, sports, girls, and whatever else we cared about at the time. Eventually, he brought up the idea of going to a Halloween party in his neighborhood that a bunch of people from our high school were going to. At first, I was a bit hesitant about the idea, but after some convincing, I was down to go. I'm not introverted or anything, I just wasn't feeling like partying that night. But Connor was dying to go, so, trying to be a good friend, I agreed. I asked him about getting some kind of costume, and he had 2 security staff shirts that we could just throw on and use as the bare minimum of a Halloween costume. We continued to play Xbox for a few more hours until 10:30 rolled around. Connor ran upstairs to Chantel's room, telling her where we were going, as if she cared. Then we threw on our shirts and headed out. After a quick 5-minute walk, we pulled up to a Halloween-decorated house where we could hear the music blaring from inside. We walked past the decorations and through the door, where we were slammed with the loud music. The place was packed with maybe 70 other high school kids, raving and just talking in groups throughout the house. It was your average high school party. A few minutes later, I had already lost Connor as I was pulled aside by Lou, one of my baseball teammates who I'd hardly seen at all that year. He sat me down on a couch in a circle with some of my other friends and teammates. We continued to talk for a couple of hours, laughing at dumb memories brought up in conversation and partaking in activities that normally go down at parties. At this point in the night, I was feeling tired and completely out of it. I knew it was time for me to go home and get some rest for the night. I looked through the party for Connor, where he was flirting with a girl in the corner of the kitchen. As I accidentally interrupted his conversation, I asked him if it was cool for me to go back to his house and sleep. He agreed and said he was going to stay for a little longer, but the girl he was talking to asked if I could go get some drinks from the basement. I agreed to do so after realizing I completely interrupted their deep conversation. It was the least I could do. It didn't take me long to find the basement. As I opened the door and headed down the dimly lit stairs, I stumbled down a few steps and fell into the fridge. As I opened it, I was greeted by a man's voice behind me, who quietly said, "Boo." I jumped and threw my hands up, facing the direction I heard the voice from. There was a tall, 35-year-old looking man wearing a black cloak costume, standing behind me with a grin on his face, making a surprise gesture with his hands. "What the hell is that for?" I yelled, with a clear slur in my speech. The guy introduced himself as the party host's cousin. I was so out of it, I didn't even question why he was in a dark basement by himself when there was a massive party going on upstairs with loud music. The guy awkwardly tried making conversation, but I told him I needed to get my friend his drink and leave the party. I'm honestly pretty open and chatty to strangers when I'm out of it like that. But even at that moment, I didn't like his vibe, and I tried everything I could to get away. He blurted, "Nice meeting you," as I turned around, walking up the creaking stairs. I told my friend goodbye and left the party. The lights and Halloween decorations on each house in the neighborhood lit up the street as I walked back to Connor's house. It didn't really matter though, because the walk was literally 5 minutes at most. I reflected on the weird exchange I had with that man in the basement as I walked, and I couldn't shake the odd vibes he gave off. The more I thought about it, the weirder it became in my head. I eventually got to Connor's house. It was completely dark, and Chantel's car was gone from the driveway, meaning I was home alone. I walked into the dark, eerie house and didn't bother turning on any lights, just headed straight to the basement to sleep. I walked down there and passed out on the couch like a baby for maybe 15 minutes, until I heard a crashing noise upstairs. It woke me right up. I tried listening for anything else, but I heard nothing. I thought I was hearing things, then tried getting back to sleep. I don't know how much time passed from when I first heard the crash, but I could hear the floorboards above me creaking like someone was walking around on them. I thought it was Connor or Chantel, but it sounded way too heavy to be either of them. I pulled out my phone and texted Connor, asking if he was home yet. I stared at the ceiling, trying to listen. The door to the basement opened. I could hear a person walking down the staircase. I peeked around the bend of the room to see the stair opening. I saw the man I saw earlier at the party, standing right there, quietly illuminated by the stair light. I tried not to make any noise, praying that the man would just walk away. A few moments passed by before he randomly turned and quietly walked out of the basement, closing the door. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation to them, gave them everything they needed, and I waited patiently in the basement for them to show up. I tried opening the windows down there, but they were all sealed shut. I had no escape through the basement door that the man was standing by earlier. The cops eventually came, and they arrested the man because he was still there. He was found hiding underneath Chantel's bed. She had gotten home and was getting ready for bed, moments away from getting into bed when she heard the cops knocking on the front door downstairs. I have no idea what his intention was, but clearly he followed me home. The whole encounter has really confused me. I'm just glad things played out the way they did. Oddly enough, the cops were able to review neighboring houses' cameras, and they saw the man following me home. But then he lost me after taking the corner into the cul-de-sac. He ended up lurking on Chantel, watching her get out of her car and walk into the house. Then he snuck around to the backyard and broke in through the back door. Always be alert of your surroundings. Thanks for listening. If you want to help build the True Chiller community, like, subscribe, and share.